All right, YouTube, there's more Obamacare related news now that's being reported. Link in the description to a Forbes article from actually a couple of days ago. Enrollment in Obamacare's federal exchange so far may only be in single digits. Now, Forbes, of course, leans right, so we can't assume that it's actually that low. What we can, however, state, because we're getting it from local media sources, is that very, 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 very small numbers of people are actually signing up for this so-called affordable health care. And that's due to several things. Firstly, there seems to be some ineptitude with which these sites that are administering these healthcare plans were laid out in the first place. They could have been rushed in some way. It could be a lack of funding. It could be any of a million different explanations. A lot of these sites simply aren't working properly. The vast majority of people that visit them aren't actually able to create an account and then sign up. There also, and this may or may not be true for each of these, some states are handling it more or less themselves. So this may not be the case everywhere. Some people are saying that when you go to this site and create an account, you have to choose a plan before you can even see what your premiums and deductibles and all that shit will be. Who in their right mind, regardless of their political leanings, regardless of their financial ability to make ends meet, I mean, they could be rich, middle class, poor, they could be completely Democrat, completely Republican, independent, anywhere on the spectrum. Who in their right mind would sign up for a healthcare program without knowing the nitty-gritty details of how much it's likely going to cost them, at least in the short term? You'd have to be a complete fucking moron to sign up for one of these programs in any of these places where you're not actually able to see what you're signing up for. And think of the type of people that this program is geared towards, primarily the elderly, people with some sort of severe condition, and people in the lower income brackets, who the Democrats themselves constantly say, well, these people are suffering. Well, and the poor especially, well, we need to get their educational rates up and make it, they can go to college and all these things. If these are people that presumably have lower education, I'm not insulting the poor. I happen to have been raised poor myself, so no affront to anybody who's of lower economic means. Presumably, as an aggregate group, lower educational attainment. And people who are old, who are not tech literate generally, and people who are sick. These people might be dying. And they're trying to foist programs on them without them being able to read what's in them, without knowing how much it's going to cost them. That's just plain dishonest. Another reason that people aren't signing up, presumably, is that they're getting sticker shock, because where figures are actually given, they're seeing that these programs simply are going to cost too much. Now, I already checked with several sites, financial calculators that are geared towards showing you, they can't give you an exact number. They can give you an estimate based on income and, do you smoke, pre-existing conditions, blah, blah, blah. Of course, I don't really have any pre-existing conditions, so that's one thing that would I would assume, lower my cost. And I'm also, I'm 25. I'm not exactly elderly. But I checked what the likely prices would be, and even the most conservative estimate of how much I would be forced to pay is way too high for me to be able to pay. So why would I sign up? I would rather pay that fine, which is a small portion of your income, which it's peanuts compared to what the program would cost, or this static fine, this $95. It goes up over the next 2 years to a much higher figure. Either way, though, it's still a lot cheaper than healthcare for somebody, again, like me. I'm young. I don't have pre-existing conditions. I'm not continuously abusing my body. I'm not a binge drinker. I don't smoke 10 packs of cigarettes a day. I don't use drugs. I don't do anything particularly abusive to my body. I'm not in a high-risk job, aka I'm not, Saddam Hussein's corpse's graveside guard or anything like that. Why would I pay this much higher amount of money when I could simply pay the fine, take that extra money that I saved, put it in some sort of account, and then when I'm older and I actually need medical attention, hopefully then when I'm older I can sign up presumably for a private program, or I can use that money I squirreled away, and it's no different. You know, the odds of me suffering some catastrophic accident or, you know, having a massive stroke or anything, yeah, the risk is there. That's the risk you take, but that's years down the road. And at that point, am I really going to care? If I'm 75 years old and I stroke out, do I really care, you know, whether I live or die? To tell the truth, I don't. So what you see being reported and here's the thing actually first that Obama and people who supported Obamacare should be very worried about. You see these right-leaning sites reporting on how it's not working, but you haven't really seen, have you seen many reports on typically pro-Obama news networks about Obamacare in the last few days? Since California was forced to revise its estimates of hits, they said at first it was something like 5-6 million. They revised it down to like 640,000. They were forced to backtrack it by almost an order of magnitude of how many people had visited their exchange site. These media outlets presumably are getting updates from Obama's staff on how the program is doing. Why would they not be crowing and reporting the great news about how many people are signing up unless people weren't really signing up for these programs? And looking at the cost for somebody like me, I'm in good health, I'm young, I don't have pre-existing conditions, looking at how much I would be forced to pay. I'm certainly not rich by any means, so it's not like I'm getting hammered because I'm some multi-millionaire with a private island and 3 homes. I would still get hammered for signing up for these programs, even though I'm not a person of great means. And I'm not a person that maybe the thing is this, maybe if I had pre-existing conditions, or, you know, I was dirt poor and living in an old pickup truck, maybe I'd get enough subsidies to actually afford this program. The problem is the way Obamacare was structured. The idea was you would lower costs for most of the people in the middle class and get them onto these programs, as well as young individuals, maybe entrepreneurs, they may have their own business. These are people with at least some wealth and means. If you get all these people onto the programs, it's not a problem to subsidize people with pre-existing conditions because it's a small proportion of the population. It's not difficult to subsidize the old because, yeah, they're a larger and growing proportion of the population, but still you've got these tens, hundreds of millions of people potentially from the middle and the lower classes who are able-bodied generally. The idea was if you had a large enough population of people on such a program, it wouldn't be hard to subsidize those that actually need it, and costs would only be very slightly higher for people even in the upper middle class who can afford that hit. The problem is people don't seem to be signing up. Now, again, as I stated before with my other video on this topic, it could be that a lot of this is due to the glitchiness of these computer systems they're using to try to get people to sign up. If that's the case and that gets cleared up, then probably a lot more people will enter the exchanges. But there's always the chance that's not the case. There's always the chance that the main reason, rather than being glitchy, the main reason why people are visiting these sites and not actually getting any form of insurance is simply because they'd rather pay the fine. And I think that's more likely the case. You see a lot of people erupt. There was one person, and I'm not sure whether it's legitimate, who claimed that they registered and they chose a program. I saw how much it was because you have to choose the program before you can see the actual cost, and said nope.jpg and opted out, and then they got an email saying that they were going to have to pay a fine of something like $4,300 for opting out of the program after already having chosen coverage. Is this legitimate? It's purely anecdotal. It's from Facebook. No clue if this is true. If it is true, this is the most worrying thing of all about Obamacare, that people can actually be forced to pay a fine for opting out once they've already discovered how much it will cost. If that's the case, then we have a serious, serious issue here, which will require a great deal of public outcry to solve. As essentially, you'd have to get rid of Obamacare. You'd have to put pressure on the Democrats to get rid of it, because that sort of action is totally unacceptable, if it's even legal. To tell the truth, if a business were to do that, there'd probably be some lawsuits. But again, I can't prove that that's actually legitimate. It could be someone's idea of a joke. It could be some Tea Party Republican thought that up and said, wow, I'm really going to scare people and this will keep more people off the exchanges. But I already checked. I would have to pay far too much, well beyond my means, to get health insurance under this program. So I'm not going to even go to the exchange sites. I'm not even going to be one of those people that hit the sites, because there's no reason for me to, because even if it's a much more conservative estimate of how much I'd pay, it'd still be too much for me to pay. I'd rather just pay that, at first, relatively small fine. The hope is that if this program truly is this screwed up, and you got to realize it just barely got through, it just barely took effect, in any program, there will be kinks at the beginning. It could get a lot better. It could be that people are sort of being alarmist. The hope is, though, that if it really is going to be this problematic and we continue to see these problems and these claims that people are making about getting potential liens on their homes because they have to pay a fine and have their wage garnished because they clicked through to a program, if these are true, the hope is that that even the Democrats in Congress will end up bowing to public pressure and saying to Obama, basically, scrap the program or at least delay it and let's rework this program and find out exactly what's going on here, because it's becoming unpopular. And you see, and polls can lie, but it seems rather self-explanatory that the majority of Americans want this law at least delayed, while things are worked out for, which isn't, and people are acting, this isn't all Democrats, by the way, but I lean left on some issues, although I'm an independent and a libertarian leftist more. I have concerns about it too. I think it's fairly reasonable to ask for it to be delayed because there are obviously problems with the program. It would have been nice if they could get the sites up and running properly before they implemented it, because of course the deadline for coverage rolls closer every day, and a lot of these sites are still not really functional. That's just cutting down the amount of time people have to weigh their options if they do decide to sign up. And it's not, again, and this is something that I will disagree with a substantial number of Americans on, it is not strange and not an unwillingness to compromise on the part of Republicans to put forth a rider onto this bill for the budget to tell Congress and their staff to take up the same health care programs. That is not unreasonable to say, because really, should Congress be exempting themselves from a law that they themselves made? I think divorced from this highly polarized issue, I think most people would say no. It's not really that unreasonable, but we'll see. I mean, it could turn out that the Affordable Care Act is actually a great thing, and that these are just temporary issues that magically cropped up and they sort themselves out, and most people are happy with their coverage after a while because it turns out, well, it's actually cheaper than we all thought it would be. I doubt that's going to be the case, though. It looks like it's going to evolve into one of those ugly programs where it really hurts people that it was supposed to help, and this has happened before. Trickle-down economics implemented by Reagan, some could argue, is another example of one of these programs. It ends up hurting people it was supposed to help. It becomes more and more unpopular, and you start to see the more moderate Democrats, some of these people, again, are also questioning the logic of the Affordable Care Act. Because really, when people check the prices, they find out it's not affordable. That's the point of the law in the first place, was to bring prices down for people who actually needed it. It does not seem to have worked. And again, because I'm criticizing it for faults that are clearly there, some people will make jokes saying that I'm referring to it as Marxist medicine or, socialized healthcare or something, which I haven't done in my videos. people like to bring that up because it's a wedge issue and then they can debate on that. It's a straw man argument. And they like to do that because it makes it easier on them, but you're not going to be able to distract me from the actual issue, which is simply look at the bill and what it was supposed to accomplish, then look at it what it's actually accomplishing. It's the most straightforward logic you can have. You don't need to bandy around a bunch of buzzwords and talk about socialism, Marxism, teabaggers, tea partiers, whatever words that they're using now to try to smear this issue in both directions, and both sides are responsible for this happening. You simply have to look at whether it seems to be working. And also there's an element of popularity to it. Even though politics, laws shouldn't be based solely on whether they're popular, because democracy is two wolves and a sheep deciding what to have for dinner. But if a law grows so unpopular and so useless that nobody's really paying attention to it, what's the point of having it on the books? Especially when it's over 10,000 pages long. And also, if you've used any of these calculating sites to find out what you can presume to pay under Affordable Health Care Act, tell me what you think. Is it going to make it more affordable for you, or is it going to screw you, or is it about the same? Because there are people saying all three. Some handful of people I've seen are saying, well, lowered my premium, I'm getting great health care for a great price. I'm seeing 10 times as many people saying they checked it out and say they can't possibly afford it, and a few people saying it's basically not a change. For them, of course, it doesn't really matter. That's